The Book of the Sages, by Eliphas Levi. This book is divided into two parts. The first, chapters 1 to 10, contains dialogues that bring together all the religious and philosophical polemics of the present century. The second, chapters 11 to 22, contains definitions and aphorisms. There are neither flowers of rhetoric nor empty phrases here. There are two eternal things, and they alone have preoccupied the author: justice and truth. Eliphas Levi. Discussion in the form of a dialogue. Chapter 1. First dialogue. A cleric and Eliphas Levi. The cleric. Your alleged sciences come from hell, and your arguments are blasphemies. Eliphas Levi. I do not know if your ignorance comes from heaven. However, your arguments closely resemble insults. The cleric. I call things by their names. So much the worse for you if these names prove insulting to you. How can you, having left the church, seeking to help impiety undermine its eternal edifice at its base, have the mad pride to believe that it wavers under the blows of your peers, and, as the height of outrage, extend your sacrilegious hand to support it? Do you not fear the fate of Uzzah, whom God struck dead because, with better intentions than yours and with hands perhaps purer, he sought to support the Holy Ark? Eliphas Levi. I must stop you right here, sir. You quote the Bible without understanding it, and in your place I would prefer to understand it without quoting it. The death of Uzzah, of which you speak, somewhat resembles the tragic end of the 42 children devoured by bears for having laughed at the prophet Elisha, who was bald. Fortunately, as Voltaire says in this regard, there are no bears in Palestine. The cleric. So the Bible is a tissue of lies, and you laugh at it like Voltaire? Eliphas Levi. The Bible is a hieratratic, that is, sacred book. It is written in a priestly style, mingled with histories and allegories. The cleric. Only the church has the right to interpret the Bible. Do you believe in its infallibility? Eliphas Levi. I belong to the church, and I have neither said nor written anything contrary to my teachings. The cleric. I admire your audacity. Are you not a free thinker? Do you not believe in progress? Do you not admit the temerities of modern science, which every day contradicts the Holy Scripture? Do you not believe in the indefinite antiquity of the world and in the diversity, whether simultaneous or successive, of the human races? Do you not consider the story of Adam's apple, upon which the dogma of original sin is founded, as a myth or a fable, which is the same thing? Yet you know well that then everything collapses. No more revelation nor incarnation, for all of Christianity has been nothing but a long error, and the church can only maintain itself by prescribing common sense and propagating ignorance? Do you admit this and dare to call yourself a Catholic? Eliphas Levi. What does the word Catholic mean? Does it not mean universal? I believe in the universal dogma, and I beware of the aberrations of all particular sections. I endure them, however, in the hope that progress will be fulfilled and that all men will reunite in the faith of fundamental truths, which has already been accomplished in that society known throughout the world called Freemasonry. The cleric. Come now, sir, you finally take off your mask entirely. You are undoubtedly a Freemason, and you know perfectly well that Freemasons have just recently been excommunicated by the Pope. Eliphas Levi. Yes, I know, and since then I have ceased to be a Freemason, because the Freemasons excommunicated by the Pope did not believe they should tolerate Catholicism. I have separated myself from them to safeguard my freedom of conscience and not to associate myself with their reprisals. Perhaps excusable, if not legitimate, but certainly inconsequential, since the essence of Masonry is tolerance toward all faiths. The cleric. You mean indifference in matters of religion? Eliphas Levi. You mean in matters of superstition? The cleric. Oh, I know that for you religion and superstition are one and the same thing. Eliphas Levi. I believe, on the contrary, that they are two opposite and irreconcilable things, so much so that, in my eyes, the superstitious are impious. As for religion, there is but one, and there has never been but one true religion. It is this one that I call truly Catholic or universal. A Muslim can practice it, as the Emir Abd al-Qadir demonstrated so well when he saved the Christians of Damascus. This religion is charity. The symbol of charity is communion, and the opposite of communion is excommunication. To commune is to evoke God. To excommunicate is to evoke the devil. The cleric. That is why you have the devil in you, for certainly such doctrines make you an excommunicate. Eliphas Levi. If I had the devil in me, it would be you who had given him to me, and I would certainly not be malicious enough to return him to you. I would treat him as merchants treat counterfeit coins, which they nail to their counters to remove them from circulation. The cleric. I do not want to listen to you anymore. You are an eccentric and an impious man. Eliphas Levi. Laughing. You know everything about me, and you say things that I am far from suspecting in myself. I am not so wise, and I will not say what you are. I only point out to you that what you say to me is neither charitable nor courteous. The cleric. You are one of the most dangerous enemies of the Church. Eliphas Levi. It is Monsieur de Mireville who has said this. However, I will answer him, as I do you, with these lines from our good and great La Fontaine. Nothing is more dangerous than an imprudent friend. A wise enemy would be better. Chapter 2. Second Dialogue. A Philosopher and Eliphas Levi. The philosopher. Entering. What were you doing with that fanatic? Eliphas Levi. Nothing very good, I believe. I would have appreciated being able to calm him down. However, I only succeeded in enraging him even more. The philosopher. Besides, what do you have to do with such people? And why do you insist on still declaring yourself a Catholic? You alienate the freethinkers, and the Catholics despise you. Eliphas Levi. It is a misunderstanding. The philosopher, of which you are the cause. Why do you insist on saying dog when you mean cat? Eliphas Levi. I do not believe I have allowed myself such eccentricities of language. I call things by their names, but it has happened that I have seen dogs and cats that get along marvelously. The philosopher. This proves nothing in favor of your dream, which is an impossible agreement between religion and science, between dogmatic authority and freedom of inquiry. Eliphas Levi. Why impossible? The philosopher. Because religion is the dream that seeks to dictate the law to reason. It is the absurdity that imposes itself with the obstinacy of madness. It is the pride of ignorance that, to believe itself supernatural, invents virtues contrary to nature. It is Alexander VI put in the place of God. It is the key to heaven placed in the bloody hands of the inquisitors. Eliphas Levi. No, religion is none of that. Religion is faith, hope, and charity. The philosopher. What do you call faith? Eliphas Levi. Faith is the affirmation of what ought to be, and the confident aspiration for what is good to hope for. The philosopher. Let us step out of the clouds, if you permit. You call yourself a Catholic. Well then, do you know what a Catholic is? Eliphas Levi. Catholic means universal. A Catholic is one who binds himself to the universal beliefs, that is, to the single religion, the core of which is found in the dogmas of all peoples and of all times. The philosopher. No, sir. A Catholic, according to Vuillet, whom Rome does not condemn, is one who believes that Jesus Christ is the sole God and that he speaks through the mouth of the Pope. Eliphas Levi. Let us leave Vuillet aside and reason. The philosopher. No, since we are speaking of religion, you well know that, according to a highly authoritative father of the Church, the object of belief is the absurd. Eliphas Levi. Is the infinite not absurd? Yet science is obliged to believe in it. Is not the eternal approach of two lines that will never touch an absurdity? Undoubtedly, geometry is compelled to admit it. There are two kinds of absurdities. Some are merely apparent, and these are the ones that stem from a flaw in our intelligence. Others are evident. Assertions contrary to demonstrated truths. Now, religion does not compel us to accept the latter. Philosopher, let us not enter the labyrinth of your mysteries. Dogma, tangled to the liking of your theologians, would afford me easy opportunities for controversy. However, these antiquities are so abandoned nowadays that we no longer concern ourselves with them, not even to laugh. In short, Christianity has long been surpassed by progress, and if you wish to pour new wine into your old wineskin, you will lose both the wineskin and the wine. Let old Catholicism die in peace. It does not accept you. To it you are a renegade and sacrilegious. You have the courage of your free-thinking, and let the dead bury their dead. Making ridiculous efforts to reconcile with modern civilization is the syllabus, and in truth this must kill that. You wish to reconcile Pulcinella and force, but Pulcinella refuses to hear of the latter, and you plan to hang the executioner yourself, paying no mind to the cat's scratches. Forgive me if I am not very serious. It is because, in truth, your faith based on expedients and prejudices is not serious. It exaggerates the absurd to increase its juggling acts. It may be very beautiful, but it is useful to no one and becomes quite bothersome for you. Eliphas Levi. Let us set aside my personal interests. I have none, and I wish to have no others but those of the truth. The philosopher. Very well. The truth evident to anyone of good faith, is that there is no universal relationship, and religions devour one another. All sectarians claim that God has spoken to them, but you well know that God never speaks except through the mouths of his priests, who curse one another and will never agree. You wish to preserve the dogma and suppress the priest, but they balance each other and even support one another. God is the priest of heaven, just as the priest claims to be God on earth. Dispense with the priest, and he will take away his God and prove to you that you are an atheist. Eliphas Levi. I do not wish to dispense with anyone. Rather, I would like to enlighten everyone. The philosopher. Perhaps even the priests, Eliphas Levi, especially the priests, for I owe them my early education. The philosopher. Do not say it, then, for it is quite noticeable. It was among them that you learned Jesuitical reconciliations and assertions with ulterior motives. Eliphas Levi. I write about occult sciences. The philosopher. I understand, and you believe you must conceal your thoughts, but there would be a very simple means of concealing them. Not writing them down. Eliphas Levi. And not speaking, however, then I would not have the advantage of discussing this with you today. The philosopher. I am not debating your beliefs. I condemn them in the name of science and progress. Eliphas Levi. What? Even my belief in God, in the immortality of the soul, in the solidarity among all men, and in the spirit of charity. The philosopher. These are, perhaps, respectable ideas, but they do not and could not exist for science, as they are neither demonstrable nor demonstrated. Eliphas Levi. So, you believe in nothing? The philosopher. Forgive me, I believe in nature, in science, and in progress. Eliphas Levi. Your beliefs are my own. It is only a matter of understanding each other, and, before anything else, what is nature to you? The philosopher. Force and matter. Eliphas Levi. How so? Without spirit? The philosopher. Spirit is the directing force. Eliphas Levi. Very well, I ask nothing more of you. I will only add a vocative, and we shall have found God. The philosopher. God, always God. I cannot bear this word. It does not belong to science. Eliphas Levi. It is true, it belongs to faith. However, science cannot do without it. The philosopher. That is what I deny. Eliphas Levi. Yes, without being able to prove the strength of your denial. The philosopher. It is up to you to prove it, since you are the one affirming it. Eliphas Levi. I affirm that faith exists and that it is within the nature of man. I affirm that faith is reasonable, given that science is limited. I affirm, finally, that faith is necessary because, like you, I believe in progress. Without faith, science leads to nothing but absolute doubt and a distaste for all things. Without faith, life is nothing but a dream, which will end, without awakening, in nothingness. Without faith, affections are empty. Honor is nothing more than a delusion, virtue a lie, and morals a deception. Without faith, science is nothing more than the despotism of wealth, equality is impossible, and fraternity does not exist. Philosophers of atheism, partisans of blind force and driving matter, you are not men of progress. You already made one of our masters in the last century laugh. His name was Lamothe, and he was one of the physicians to the King of Prussia. It is sad to see you squander so much wit to prove that you are beasts. I tell you, sir, you could not be directed, for you believe in intelligent force and in progress. Intelligent force is spirit, and progress is immortality. The philosopher. All of this has not been demonstrated. But what is evident to you, is it not evident to me? Eliphas Levi. I extend my hand to you, and let us part as good friends. The philosopher. Farewell, then. Eliphas Levi. Yes, to God. For you claim not to believe in him, even though you invoke him without thinking. Chapter 3. Third Dialogue. A Pantheist and Eliphas Levi. The Pantheist. It is impossible to conceive of a God that is anything other than the universality of beings. Eliphas Levi. Very well. You are a disciple of Spinoza, and I will tell you, however, that there never was and there is no other Spinoza than the collection of this philosopher's works. The Pantheist. This is a joke in poor taste. We well know that it is men who make books and that folios do not gravitate through space by themselves. However, the same is not true of the worlds. The fatal law of balanced movement produces them and can destroy them in the necessary revolutions of the eternal universe. Eliphas Levi. Thus, our universe is fatal. It is, consequently, as blind and deaf as fatality. How, then, can it give us the intelligence it does not possess? The Pantheist. The universe is intelligent, and that is why I call it God. Eliphas Levi. Do you believe that, in man, it is the body that produces the phenomenon of thought? The pantheist. I feel thought in my head, and I know that it is produced in my brain. Eliphas Levi. Yes, like music on a violin. The pantheist. Oh, let us go slowly. Do you mean that our soul uses the brain as an instrument, yet only anatomists know the mechanism of this instrument? The child who begins to think does not even know they possess a brain and cannot imagine utilizing its fibers and resources. The brain functions, therefore, by itself under the dual impulse of nature and life. Eliphas Levi. Common sense assures us that our brain is something, but it is not someone. It is something whose form and use someone has determined, and if there are instruments that seem to play by themselves, these instruments reveal nothing but the existence of a skilled mechanic and of a music that the instrument does not invent. The pantheist. I think it is as you say, however, for me, the great mechanic and the musician of the harmonies of nature is the immense, the eternal universe, which exists by the very necessity of being, which is infinite, to which you attribute the useless functions of the Creator. The word creation, on the other hand, is an absurdity if one supposes that something can come from nothing. Substance is one, infinite, eternal, and successive and spontaneous creations are nothing more than manifestations of appearances, physical combinations. All the natural sciences tend today to demonstrate this. You yourself are constrained to admit it and no longer believe in the despotic and capricious God of the Middle Ages, the God who is an enemy of nature, the God of vengeance and of miracles. You consider God to be the soul of the universe, a soul distinct from the body, you say, yet inseparable, I will add, since God cannot die. Without the phenomenon of death, which leaves the body inert and cold, man would be indivisible, and his soul would not be differentiated from his body. Indeed, it is not only the soul that lives. It is the whole man in his entirety, and thought is the light of life. We do not differentiate, therefore, the soul of the universe from the universe itself. The universe is the great whole, intelligent and visible. When it thinks, it is called spirit. When it takes a form, it is matter. However, matter and spirit are not two beings, they are two forms of existence. The eternal and infinite substance is the genesis of thought and form, not outside of itself where nothing exists, but in itself and by itself. This is what we call God. Eliphas Levi. I let you speak, and I think as you do on many points, but I will never admit that God is the universe, because this would return me to the idolatry of the ignorant centuries in which the sun and the moon were worshipped. Everything is of God, certainly, but not everything is God, and human freedom must not allow itself to be absorbed by the great divine fatality that you seem to admit. If everything were God, man would not be responsible for anything and morality would be a chimera. What idea, then, would we form of divine wisdom and of human errors and foolishness? If, however, we were absurd, God would be ridiculous. God himself would be the author of evil and thus would negate himself, or the word of God would no longer have any reasonable meaning. Let us leave to the God Pan of the ancients his flutes and his horns. When Jesus, dying on the cross, had proclaimed the inviolability of the human conscience and the freedom of faith, confirmed by the right to martyrdom, a mysterious pilot named Themis shouted to the islands that the great Pan had died, and confused voices were heard weeping for the giant of ancient mythology. God, in humanity, had just triumphed over fatality and death, and humanity becomes divine, not by sacrilegious usurpation or by a confusion of natures, but by a sublime alliance. The pantheist. Stop there and do not prolong these sermonizing phrases. You are free to still praise Christianity, but it is what is now dead, and the great Pan has resurrected. Christianity was a disease of the human spirit, and our poor earth narrowly escaped becoming a madhouse. The dementia of blind faith placed above science and reason, pain preferred to pleasure, misery to wealth, celibacy against nature exhausting the springs of fecundity, ferocious fanaticism imposing itself by iron and fire, the autocracy of priests, the brutalization of men, the misery of peoples. That is Christianity. It is judged by its own weapons. Eliphas, Levi. So, according to you, it was right to crucify Jesus Christ, and if Nero had succeeded in extirpating Christianity, he would have been the true savior of the world. The pantheist. Nothing proves the historical existence of Jesus Christ. Christianity is a current of ideas that does not come from a single man, and you yourself have affirmed and proven that the Christ of the Gospels is a symbolic figure of man liberated from legal servitudes, freely sacrificing himself for the triumph of truth and justice. According to the sacred myth, his sacrifice was necessary for the salvation of the world, and those who crucified him were the executors of God's high justice. As for Nero and other persecutors, they are universally condemned by human conscience. Truth must not be imposed by fear, it must be proven by reason. However, pagans, Jews, and Christians were all equally fanatical, and, from the victims they were at the beginning, they became executioners from the moment they could do so with impunity. Nero is no more appalling than Saint Dominic, Torquemada, and Domitian, and there are still people who mourn the absence of the Dragonades. On the other hand, the famous maxim attributed to King Louis Philippe, responsibility only exists when one does not triumph. Eliphas, Levi. I accept this maxim. What is, in fact, an achieved thing? It is a thing well done. To do well is to triumph, and he who does not triumph is more or less responsible for his own ineptitude. Things, in reality, are so ordered by the supreme wisdom that evil could not have a real and lasting success, and that good, despite all delays and all obstacles, always reaches its end. You speak of the evil that was produced in connection with Christianity. This evil has partly passed, and what remains of it will pass. However, the good remained and will remain. It is not in the name of Torquemada, but in the name of Vincent de Paul that the Sisters of Charity care for poor orphans. Alexander VI never published an apostolic constitution justifying poisoning and incest. Religion is holy. It is men who are evil. The pantheist. No, sir, men are not evil. By speaking thus, you slander your mother, holy and divine nature. But reflect, and you will resent your deplorable clerical education. Do you know what made Alexander VI evil? It is that he considered himself the vicar and representative of God, who eternally burns his enemies. Yet are not the enemies of the Pope, in the eyes of the Pope, the enemies of God? The poison of the Borgias was a very sweet penalty compared to the torments of hell, and who knows if this indulgent vicar of Jupiter Olympus did not give indulgences for the other world to his bottles of Syracuse wine. It is said that he poisoned the hosts. It was a way of making them actively indulgent for a good death. Was he not the master of masters and the king of kings? Was he not infallible, which certainly means impeccable? Do not speak to us of your pernicious beliefs. They lead to the apotheosis of a new Nero, whenever he, instead of the crown of the Caesars, wears the tiara of the pontiffs. Did you not canonize the horrible and bloody Ghislieri? Does not your Vuillet still shed? Crocodile tears over the abolition of the autos de fe? Oh, if these people regained power for a single instant, how they would hurl us all, with our children and our wives, under the wheels of the rotten chariot that still drags their implacable juggernaut. Do not declare yourself Catholic anymore, you who are a freethinker, or do you think the Holy Inquisition of Rome will not demand an account of your works? Leave that Vatican from which the gods departed long ago, from which even the rats are beginning to flee, and over which, since the victory of Montana, clouds of crows and vultures have been forming. Eliphas Levi. Hold on there, sir. If there are crows in the Vatican, there are also eagles. It is France that holds Rome, and Rome, sooner or later, must count on France, which marches, as you know, at the head of civilization and progress. According to the sectarians of Vuillet, who abandoned them, the Pope would be reaction and comprehension divinized. But it will not be so. The Pope will be or will not be. I believe that he must be, and that he can be nothing other than the crowned gospel. The pantheist. Are you still on this, and do you not see that the gospel was surpassed long ago by common sense and by science? There are good things in the gospel, I know well. It is the good seed mixed with the chaff. However, there are also barbaric teachings and deplorable doctrines. Thus, forgiving your enemies so that God may punish them even more, not resisting evil, hating your father and mother, hating yourself, which gives a strange meaning to the concept of loving your neighbor as yourself, encouraging laziness through alms and injustice through the voluntary abandonment of what is intended to be stolen from you, preferring sterile isolation to family life, hating the world and making oneself hated by it. Well then, the world, in the sense of the gospel, is the society of men. To slay before the king, or rather before God, those who do not want his Son, that is, Jesus Christ, represented by the Pope, to reign over them, to abjure one's reason, to crush one's affections, to adore humiliation and pain. This is the foundation of these Gospels, so insipid. The rest, that is, the truly moral precepts, belong to the philosophy of all centuries. That is the core of the Christian religion. In truth, a reasonable man today can neither publicly defend nor secretly admit such a religion. Catholicism has ceased to be a church. It is a sect, and the most horrible of all sects. Even Protestantism no longer has a reason to exist and is dissolving day by day into pantheism, which is the only universal and true religion. Eliphas Levi. Very well. Then everything is God, I am God, you are God, foolishness is God, crime is God, and consequently, according to you, even Vuillet is God, clericalism is God, and the Pope is God. The pantheist. No jokes unworthy of you. God is the affirmation and not the negation of all things. He is what he is and not what he pretends to be. He is the truth and not the lie. Have you not said yourself that evil has no real existence? Eliphas Levi. Absolutely, without a doubt. However, in the relative, there is an existence that is all too real since it operates against the good. Therefore, does this action, according to you, come from God? The pantheist. Yes, just as your shadow comes from your body and as diseases come from health. Eliphas Levi. Then your God is sick when men do evil, and when they tell lies. Is it the Spirit of God that lends them his shadow? The pantheist. Light needs shadow to produce visible forms, and what you call evil is necessary for the triumph of good. God casts a shadow to manifest his light and reveals himself as light only to justify his shadow. This is what your mystery of redemption means. This is the reason for the devil's existence, who is the mask of shadow upon the splendid face of God. This is the equilibrium of heaven and hell. This is the Satan of the book of Job receiving from God himself the mission to torment the righteous. This is why your symbols recount that Jesus Christ descended into hell? Eliphas, Levi. Then are there any guilty parties left? Are all men innocent? Are the angels of darkness the servants of the divine mask? Is punishment an injustice? Is morality a trick played on the weak to make them slaves of the strong? Are the wicked the most powerful auxiliaries of virtue, and do the righteous owe them their crowns? Do you not feel, sir, that such a monstrous doctrine is subversive of all order and that, consequently, it is contrary to all truth, because order is truth and what is disorder is a lie? The pantheist. What you say comes from your system of occultism, but deep down you think like I do. Eliphas, Levi. I protest. On the contrary, I believe in God, the cause of everything, and I do not confuse the cause with the effect. I believe in the freedom of man and consequently in his morality. I grant you all the rest. Chapter 4. Fourth dialogue. And Israelite and Eliphas, Levi. The Israelite. Having heard your conversation with that atheist, I note with pleasure that you dismantle the errors of Christianity. Eliphas, Levi. Yes, without a doubt, but it is to defend its truths with greater energy. The Israelite. What are the truths of Christianity? Eliphas, Levi. The same as those of the religion of Moses, plus the efficacious sacraments with faith, hope, and charity. The Israelite. And furthermore, idolatry, that is, the worship that is due to God, rendered to a man and even to a piece of bread. The priest placed in the stead of God himself, condemning the Israelites to hell, that is, the worshippers of the true God and the heirs to his promise. Eliphas, Levi. No, son of our fathers, we do not put anything in the place of God. We believe, as you do, that his divinity is unique, immutable, spiritual, and we do not confuse him with his creatures. We worship God in the humanity of Jesus Christ, and not that humanity in the place of God. There exists between us a misunderstanding that has lasted for many centuries and has caused much blood and many tears to be shed. The supposed Christians who persecuted you were fanatics and impious men, unworthy of the spirit of that Jesus who forgave those who crucified him and died, saying, "Forgive them, my Father, for they know not what they do." Our dogma, on the other hand, does not begin with Jesus Christ. It is contained entirely within the mysteries of the Kabbalah, whose tradition traces back to the patriarch Abraham. Our God-man is the human and divine archetype of the Zohar realized in a living man. Our incarnate word, called Logos by Plato and by St. John the Evangelist, that is to say, reason manifested by the word, is called Hakma in the doctrine of the Sephiroth. The Israelite. I interrupt you here and declare that, among us, the Kabbalah is not an authority. We no longer know it because it was profaned and disfigured by the Samaritans and by the Eastern Gnostics. Maimonides, one of the great lights of the synagogue, considers the Kabbalah to be useless and dangerous. He does not want us to occupy ourselves with it. He wants us, rather, to adhere to the creed, of which he himself formulated the 13 articles in the Sefer Torah, to the prophets and to the Talmud. Eliphas, Levi. Yes, but the Sefer Torah, the prophets, and the Talmud are unintelligible without the Kabbalah. I will say more. These sacred books are the Kabbalah itself written in hieratic hieroglyphs, that is, in allegorical images. Scripture is a closed book without the tradition that explains it, and the tradition is the Kabbalah. The Israelite. That is what I deny. The tradition is the Talmud. Eliphas, Levi. You say that the Talmud is the veil of tradition. The tradition is the Zohar. The Israelite. Can you prove it? Eliphas, Levi. Yes, if you have the patience to listen to me, for I would have to reason extensively, cite and compare authors, assess what Frank and Drach say. Two Kabbalistic scholars who do not agree explain Genesis and Ezekiel, seek in the latter the key to the revelation of St. John, analyze the Mishnah and see how it differs essentially from the Gemara, apply to the first 7 chapters of Genesis the alphabetical and numerical keys of the Sefer Yetzirah, return to the dogmatic books of the Zohar, and deeply study the Sifra Ditzanutha with the explanations of the Greater and Lesser Holy Synod. All of this takes time, which I would willingly dedicate to you if I hope to be of use to you, and it would require a long and continuous attention, which surely you would not give me. The Israelite. Why? Eliphas, Levi. Because I am not a rabbi nor even an Israelite, at least not in the way you believe. The Israelite. I certainly believe it, and I am quite sure of it. Eliphas, Levi. It is useless to speak any longer, for you would listen to me with a suspicion that would increase with the very force of my arguments. You are still far too Jewish. Come visit me when you doubt your religion, and I will show you ours. Chapter 5. Fifth Dialogue. A Protestant and Eliphas, Levi. The Protestant. Sir, you wrote this in one of your books. I am more Catholic than the Pope, more Protestant than Luther. What can be the meaning of these strange words? Eliphas, Levi. This means that I consider admissible to the universal communion all those whom the Pope excommunicates, and that I protest against the dogmatic fantasies of your master, Martin Luther. The Protestant. Would you intend, then, to found a new sect? Eliphas, Levi. On the contrary, I would wish to merge all sects into a fraternal unity. The Protestant. Can you believe that the Pope will approve of you? Eliphas, Levi. The Pope has not yet censured me. The Protestant. And if he were to censure you? Eliphas, Levi. I would approve of his censure in advance. The Protestant. Then do you mock him and us? Eliphas, Levi. I laugh at no one. The Roman Church has declared that reason is inseparable from faith, that one can and must bring men to faith through reason, and I say nothing else. It is not, therefore, the substance of my doctrine that the Pope could censure, but only certain revelations of the mysteries of occultism, which he might find dangerous and untimely. The Protestant. He would certainly be quite right. Why do you continually mix religion and the occult sciences? You announce books of magic and you write books of religion. What can the Bible and the grimoire have in common? Eliphas, Levi. Grimoires are composed of evocations and prayers. They presuppose a dogma and contain a ritual. The occult sciences have as their starting point a secret theology, which is the Kabbalah, and they initiate into the mysteries of a ceremonial thaumaturgy analogous to the sacraments of the Church. You see, then, that one cannot teach the occult sciences without speaking a great deal about religion. The Protestant. Why did you choose and proclaim as the best, among all religions, the one that most energetically condemns magic? Eliphas, Levi. Because it is the only one that is incontestably dogmatic and truly thaumaturgic. Because the Roman religion is hierarchically constituted magic that reproves and must reprove sorcerers as uncredentialed competitors. Because only Catholic priests are true enchanters, evoking God himself and forcing him to descend from his heights, returning innocence to the guilty, erasing with a word the sentences of eternal death, opening and closing heaven at their pleasure, and disposing of eternity. The Protestant. The things you admire in the Catholic Church are precisely those that make it abominable. Its priests are, to us, nothing more than the enchanters of Pharaoh, and instead of living with them, we prefer to suffer with Israel in the desert. Eliphas, Levi, do you have the scepter of Moses? I fear that one fine day you will find yourself without God, and that out of fatigue from an ineffective religion, you will dance, like so many others, around the golden calf. Look at what England has come to. It sickens mortally amidst its riches, and pauperism corrodes it. Germany may very well expand itself. However, you will never convert the entire world to the cult of sauerkraut and beer. Its nebulous philosophy, passing through Kant and Hegel, has reached a despairing darkness. On the other hand, in Protestant countries, the life of souls slows down, and all of man's cares are directed toward purely temporal things. To drink well, to eat well, is something certain. However, man does not live by bread alone, as our great master also says. The Protestant, do we not have the Bible and the Gospel? Eliphas, Levi, yes, you have them, and you have them translated into all languages so that they may be read by savages. Texts that the wisest among us barely understand, or understand absolutely nothing of. The Bible, this babble of Oriental antiquity, this book over which the scholars of so many centuries have grown pale, this abstract encyclopedia, which one of our great poets rightly calls a terrible sea sown with reefs. This is what you place into the hands of the ignorant and the idiotic, telling them, "Take this, here is the word of God." It is up to you to understand, judge, and forge a rule of conscience for yourselves. Hence, how many absurd interpretations! Protestantism is like a great asylum, full of cells that they call sects. Some are fearful, others are dancers, many are epileptic, others immobile and taciturn. And perhaps it is in the name of reason that you invoke free inquiry. But what is liberty without laws? Is it not the same thing as reason without authority, that impotent rival of authority without reason? The Protestant, since God has spoken in the Bible, he must have wanted to be understood, and to inspire in us himself the true meaning of his words. Eliphas, Levi, if God has the obligation to inspire us, you no longer have need of the Bible. You are all prophets, and your dreams are the entirety of the law. The Protestant, however, if I am not mistaken, you yourself interpret the Bible differently than the Catholic doctors. Eliphas, Levi, the Bible has an occult meaning, the traditional science of which is called the Kabbalah among the Hebrews. This science was known to the Apostle St. John and to the wisest fathers of the primitive church. I did not invent it, and I teach nothing that comes from myself. This is what constitutes my strength and my confidence. This is what gives me the right to call even the best instructed Catholics poorly illuminated. Can you prove me wrong? The Protestant, no, because I cannot follow you in your inquiries, but I will retain my convictions. Eliphas, Levi, I do not intend to take them away. Controversy never converts anyone. One clings to the ideas one wishes to defend, and becomes more obstinate in them the stronger the attack. Convictions sustain or alter themselves on their own, as reason grows and as the light dawns. The Protestant, I hope that it dawns for you. Eliphas, Levi, I return the same wish to you. Chapter 6. Sixth Dialogue. A Doctor and Eliphas, Levi. The Doctor, will you allow me to take your pulse? Eliphas, Levi, do you think I have a fever? The Doctor, oh, I do not wish to compare you to Basilio, although you cannot prevent us from working a little for him. Eliphas Levi. How so? The doctor. Oh, you know very well. You are a freethinker, and you want absurd dogmas to be respected for the greater satisfaction of Basilio. Eliphas Levi. I do not believe Basilio is a great partisan of dogmas explained by philosophy. The doctor. And Basilio is right, because an explained dogma is a dead dogma. One studies anatomy only on corpses, one does not dissect the living. Eliphas Levi. Your comparison is flawed, doctor, because dogmas are spirits, and the spirit cannot die to be dissected like bodies. To find the answer to an enigma is not to suppress its text, which is frequently ingenious, is to clarify, perchance to destroy. The doctor. When the Sphinx's riddle is guessed, it dies. To introduce a light into a tissue paper lantern is to set fire to the lantern. An explained mystery ceases to be one. Faith is the dream of ignorance. When science is reached, the spirit awakens and the dream stops. To dream awake is to be mad, and that is where you wish to lead us. However, since you seem to me to be in very good faith, I doubt your health and have come to take your pulse. Eliphas Levi. Doctor, do you believe in medicine? The doctor. No, certainly I do not believe in it. I have studied it and I claim to know it. Eliphas Levi. And have the aphorisms of this science never seemed doubtful to you? The doctor. Never, when their truth is demonstrated to me. Eliphas Levi. Do you reject everything that is not demonstrated? The doctor. No, I study it. However, I believe in nothing before knowing. Eliphas Levi. But when one knows, one has ceased to believe. Consequently, you have never believed in anything, you do not believe in anything, and you will never believe in anything. If this is true, I pity you, doctor, because you have never loved and you will never love. The doctor. Oh, no mystical sentimentality. I love my mother and my children because I know. Eliphas Levi. Yes, you know and you knew all that, but none of it was demonstrated to you, nor can it be demonstrated yet. Could you not have been switched by the wet nurse? Your wife and your children. You believe, and you are right to believe, in the fidelity of the former and the legitimacy of the latter. However, all this, doctor, is not science, it is faith. The doctor. It is a reasonable faith. Eliphas Levi. That is the word I wanted to make you say, reasonable faith. It is the word of St. Paul, and it is also mine. I ask for nothing else. The doctor. Let us not confuse things. I speak of human and natural faith, which is essentially reasonable. You, on the contrary, speak of religious and supernatural faith, which is necessarily absurd because it presupposes a revelation of the infinite to the finite by means of an eternally incomprehensible mystery, the formula of which must be adored without ever seeking its meaning, which is equivalent to saying that God forbids men reason and imposes dementia upon them. What is a madman in reality? He is a man who believes in the hallucinations of his brain more than in the common sense of all. He is an extravagant and obstinate believer who acts according to what he imagines and not as a consequence of what he sees. I challenge you not to recognize in this portrait the supposed saints of your Catholic Church. Eliphas Levi. I should like to be as mad as St. Vincent Delaware Paul. The doctor. Oh, and as for him, you know what has been said of him with great finesse. He was a good man, whom they harmed greatly by canonizing him. Eliphas Levi. You are intractable, but let us try another line of reasoning. Do you admit that the religious sentiment exists in men, and that it is a physiological fact with which science must reckon? The doctor: Yes, I recognize the existence of this disease in a great number of men, and I am in a position to prove to you that they possess the complete characteristics of mental alienation. I recognize as its cause the distaste for reality and the melancholic desire for chimeras, an overweening ambition, and a presumption that makes man believe he can appropriate eternity and immensity, the domain of a God whom man represents as his own magnified image, filling the heavens with his colossal proportions. A man seized by this malady uses the means most directly opposed to the end he pursues. He wishes to be immortal and allows himself to die every day. He wishes to be the object of God's predilections and renders himself odious and unbearable to men, even to the most imperfect among them. He censures, bothers, and torments others under the pretext of loving them. Deep down, he loves them no more than he loves his own beliefs. He does not allow these beliefs to be debated. Contradiction on this matter infuriates him. He flees from those who wish to undeceive him and fears them, just as the mentally alienated do with doctors. Eliphas: Levi, have you finished? Will you not also speak to me a bit about the massacres committed under the pretext of religion, the autos de fe, and Street Bartholomew? I know all of this as well as you do. You posture as the adversaries of believers always do, to confuse superstition and fanaticism with religion, something for which all honest people hold an aversion. The physician: Superstition and fanaticism are the absolute in religion. Reasonable believers are lukewarm. The man who follows the light of good sense acts as a philosopher and not as a devotee. An absurd dogma demands a senseless cult. Tell me of the stylites, the ironclad, the silentiaries, the barefooted, the starving of Saint Cucufin of Saint Labrie. Here are the true believers. And do not say that you have abandoned these people. They are the favorites of your church, which has always preached and still preaches the holy folly of the cross. Eliphas: Levi, they were men of another century. Times have changed, and so have customs. The physician: only dogmas are immutable. Such is, at least, the claim of believers, yet they always change in inverse proportion to ideas and customs. Eliphas: Levi, what do you mean by that? The physician: I mean that dogmas, in order to remain immobile, become increasingly materialized, whereas the progress of the sciences tends to explain them by spiritualizing them to a greater extent. Official theology is the science of embalming dead beliefs and turning once living symbols into mummies. Eliphas: Levi, you are wrong to say embalm. Your expression reminds me of the perfumes of Rome, of that highly odoriferous vuillet. If you have read my books, you must know that I think as you do about ancient and modern Pharisaism, about false theology, etc. However, all of this is not true religion. The physician: it is as if you were to say that what is done, schemed, and prepared in all the cabinets of Europe is not true politics. Eliphas: Levi, it would not be wise of you to challenge me too much to say so. The physician: then it is understood. There is no politics other than the one you dream of, and no religion other than your personal mysticism. A blue light to illuminate the clouds that do not appear to you to be of a good color. I regret having made you speak so much, for it excites and harms you. Let your scraps of occult science sleep for a while. Do not isolate yourself. Take some exercise. Subject yourself to a refreshing regimen, and above all, do not smoke too much. Eliphas: Levi, laughing, thank you for your prescription, doctor. I believe your advice is good, and I would like to give you, in turn, some hygienic prescriptions. But unfortunately, I consider you incurable. The physician. Why? Eliphas Levi. Because you are not sick. The physician. So, you consider that I have won the case and that I have converted you. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.